Hey guys, so I'm gonna go over languages in terms of what languages are hardest to learn and what language is easiest to learn. All right, there's two ways to go about this, and I'm gonna give you some background info so you could follow my logic and thinking. So, when asking what is the hardest language for you to learn or the easiest language for you to learn, I'm gonna paint you a bit of a picture. And let's say I am no longer a polyglot. I no longer speak 6 languages. Let's say I'm a monolinguish. Let's say I'm a monolingual English speaker. Speak one language and it's English. Let's say I want to learn a new language now. So before that, first thing you gotta know is that there's something out there called language families. And it's basically what it sounds like, languages that share a family. So English shares a language family with other languages. English is from the Germanic family of languages. All right, let me give you a more common example. So a lot of you, and I think this is the most common, is you guys are well aware that Latin was a language spoken many years ago. And Latin broke off into different languages. It became Galician, it became Italian, it became French, Romanian, Catalan. And that's a language family called the Romance language family, right? So it's basically the same thing for English. English has its own language family and it's called Germanic. So, when you look at a language family, you see the common ancestor. So there's Latin, and below Latin is French, Romanian, Spanish, Catalan, and they all came from Latin, which is why they're all one family. So going back to English, what is in my language family? So English came from Germanic, and some of the languages that developed from Germanic are German, Dutch, Frisian, Swedish, and obviously English. So when thinking about what is the easiest language for me to learn as an English speaker, typically you want to look at your language family because those languages have a very common vocabulary, they have common sentence structure, and they just share commonalities with you in general that in theory just make things easier for you to learn because they are most similar to your language. And as a fun fact, Frisian is the language that is the most similar to English. Okay, so we got that out of the way. We understand how language families work. So let's go back to the question. What is the easiest language for you to learn? It depends what language family you hail from. Are you from the Romance language family? Are you from the Germanic language family? Are you from another one? Where are you from? And, once you know that, then you have the basic understanding of, well, if I'm in this language family, then all these languages, in theory, would be the easier ones for me to learn. Okay, now let's move on to the hard part. So just because I share German in my language family, it doesn't actually mean German will be the easiest language for me to learn, right? We've all heard these stories. I learned German in high school, but I don't remember it. I had a hard time. It was obviously a tough language for that person to learn, okay? Now, I can't share that same sentiment with them, but what I can say is that is a common experience. So when you think of the hardest language for you to learn or the easiest one, it doesn't always come down to language family. While that does play a good part, in terms of acquiring vocabulary faster and other things, it plays a significant part in helping you move forward. But just because it's within your language family, it doesn't actually mean you'll do a good job, right? And that can vary for different reasons. Maybe you're not that motivated. Maybe you just don't care. Or maybe you are motivated and, you pick it up fairly quickly. So that's one angle, right? So, when someone asks you what's the easiest one to learn or hardest one to learn, look at your language family for an answer. Now here's the part two, right? So there's two ways of looking at it. So that's the first way of looking at it, language family. The second way of looking at it, and the way I really like looking at it, the language family way is quite nice too. It's nothing wrong, but I like this way a lot. So imagine I'm getting this from my linguistics professor. He actually threw this example at us. So imagine we get a baby and we toss him in France. That baby will speak French at some point in its life, right? Let's say it's 1 year old. At 4 years of age, he probably speaks French. At 6 years of age, he speaks French. 7 years of age, he speaks French, right? Now let's toss that baby in China, put him in Beijing. He's gonna speak, I was about to say Chinese, but no, they speak Mandarin in Beijing. So he's gonna speak Mandarin. I was about to say Beijingese. My brain is not right. So he's gonna speak Mandarin. Toss him in Africa. Let's think of a country: Egypt, Cairo. He's gonna end up speaking Arabic, the Egyptian dialect of Arabic. So, as it turns out, you could throw a baby anywhere and it'll learn that language. It'll speak that language fluently. Okay. If you can replicate this with any baby, with any language, imagine right now that babies, you communicate with them one-on-one. They understand you. Just imagine that. And you ask the baby, which one was hardest to learn? Was it Arabic, French, or Mandarin? What would the baby say? He probably would say, I'm not sure. It depended on factors. So let's look at it from a slightly different perspective. So objectively, what is the hardest language to learn or easiest? So languages vary for different reasons. Some languages you can build big ass words, like Turkish. It's an agglutinative language. So basically, you have a 4-letter word and you can keep stacking things and it becomes a big ass word. In German, you could make a big ass word too. And that's a feature of some languages. And if that's a feature of one language, does that mean that feature is inherently difficult than other features of languages? So is that feature of being able to create a big, long word harder than tones? So in Cantonese, you'll find 6 tones. Are those 6 tones harder than that I guess concept, of being able to stack suffixes together to make a big word? And the answer is probably not. It's not inherently harder. Okay, so what about this? So quick to think, there's a thing called definite and indefinite articles, and those are known as the and a/and. So the book, the definite article is the, and then book is a noun. So the book, a book, and apple. Those are definite and indefinite articles. And not all languages have the and a, as I just explained them. Like Russian doesn't have it. Japanese doesn't have it. Does that mean those languages are easier than English because they don't have the? They don't have a apple? Does that mean they're harder than Japanese? Is Japanese easier than English because of that? Probably not, right? So you got to take those things into consideration. It's very hard to objectively say that another language is harder than another just because there's a feature that another language lacks, or a feature that's added into the language, such as making a word bigger, adding tones, getting rid of definite and indefinite articles, adding noun declensions, so forth. So when you break it down like that, you don't really have a clear answer, right? You can say all languages are complex. And that's actually what my teacher said. My professor, university professor, was all languages are complex. If it's very hard to be like, well, this one is harder than this one just because it has this thing. But okay, so I'm an English speaker and I'm about to learn Chinese. This is not true. It is true that I'm an English speaker, but I'm not about to learn Chinese. So in English, there are no 4 tones or 6 tones or that. Like, that doesn't come to play when I speak, right? So I go in knowing this difference, and I'm like, all right, let me tackle Cantonese. I see the tones. I'm like, whoa, this is different. That's a fact. It's different. Now, for me to say that that's harder, that's where things get interesting. Now, it can be from a certain perspective harder because I've never encountered it, therefore I think it's hard. But to inherently say that tones are a hard thing to do for a human is a different thing, you know? And that's why I would like for you guys to, you know, think about it differently when you think of, is a language hard or is it easy, you know? It's not always a clear-cut answer, right? It's more clear-cut when you guys share the same language family, right? If I'm an Italian speaker going to French, then the answer is more clear-cut that, yeah, French is probably going to be easy for me, you know? But once you say Italian speaker trying to learn Swahili, then it's not as clear-cut. Not to say that the person would have a difficult time or that he would have an easy... It could be he has an easy time learning Swahili, right? That can happen, right? Maybe he just had experience learning languages, so he's like, oh, well, now I know how to deal with Swahili. I know what to look for in languages. Or maybe it's first time learning a language, and it happens to be Swahili, and he's very passionate about it. And because of his passion, he's doing it every day. He's immersing himself in the culture. He's talking to native speakers all the time, and he has a easy go at it. I mean, you're always going to have some kind of struggle with the language, but overall it ends up being easy, you know? So again, it's kind of like perspective, you know? Is it harder because it's a new grammatical concept that you've never been exposed to, or is it actually just objectively harder? Like, do people from China just have more complicated ways of talking than an English speaker, or is it that they just talk different, right? I think that's more of the contrast we should be making when we look at a list of hardest languages to learn, or when we form an opinion about a language being hard or easy. We should be focusing more on, you know, is it objectively harder, or is it because it's related to my language, or, you know, think about it a bit more. Don't just be like, oh my God, Watch Mojo said Chinese is hard, so it must be hard, you know? And that goes to the final point. And, you know, if you guys are learning languages, obviously, when you see a language learning list and it's like, well, German is easy for you to learn, or German is hard for you to learn, or you hear someone saying German was hard for them to learn, take it with like a grain of salt. You know, there's a chance you have the same experience, there's a chance you don't, right? You can't predict what experience you're going to have. So, you know, when you see someone saying a certain language is easy or hard, now you know that that might not be true. Might be quite the opposite, all right? So if you have any questions about languages, about anything more specific, any tips that you want to know about, let me know. Write a comment, send an email, get in touch with me. And if it's something worth making a video about, I'll make a video about it. All right?